There's energy in the room. Love it. Lots of people.
They were here bright and early too.
I know, yeah. When I got here, it was buzzing.
Yeah, they started showing up before 8:30. Yeah.
Well, it's breakfast, right? So.
Yeah, it's true. If you're gonna start early, make sure you're doing them.
Yeah. And do you have lunch provided as well?
Yeah, lunch, and then there's morning and afternoon coffee breaks, and then we also have some hot appetizers and things like that for the serve. So they get lunch. Yeah, wow. It's a good deal for them.
I should just cancel my 4 o'clock and come for appetizers. I'll make a note to say to exec if anybody's available.
Yes, that'd be great. I will be at exec office.
No, of course not. Good to go. Good morning. My name is Brian Hogeveen. I am the Interim Vice Dean in the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. I want to start by acknowledging that the University of Alberta is situated on Treaty 6 territory, traditional gathering place of the First Nations and Métis people. Welcome to Invest in Your Future 2018. And a special welcome to our online guests who are watching this via live stream. This is the 3rd year that the faculty has hosted a career exploration symposium for graduate studies. These 2 days of workshops and keynotes are made possible by a Government of Alberta grant called A Vision for Innovation in Alberta, Excellence and Transformative Talent. At the heart of this grant is graduate student career success. Today and tomorrow is about supporting career exploration in the broadest sense. This is a fantastic opportunity, one that I wish I would have had. When I was at the University of Toronto in the early 2000s, there was no discussion of career options or trajectories. Either you followed the traditional academic route or you did not. The only option we discussed centered on what university you were going to teach at. There were no supports in place to help you navigate this treacherous terrain. I'm delighted to say that we've come a long way since I attended grad school, and the FGSR at the University of Alberta has led the way. FGSR is committed to your success as a student, and the faculty is here to support your academic and personal journeys. The workshops you are going to attend over the next few days will help define your values, your strengths, and how all of this plays into your career search, and help you answer the question of what next? It is my hope that you will walk away with tools, mental frameworks that will facilitate you making sense of the big questions and help you as you move forward in your degree. So here's a pro tip for you. Use the coffee breaks and table exercises to get to know each other. I challenge you to meet 2 or 3 new people. The University of Alberta is a big campus, and this symposium gives you an excellent opportunity to collaborate with and meet students from every corner of the university. Here's what we all know to be true. You are all very smart, driven, and curious. It is my sincere wish that those strengths will allow you to maximize your time here today and tomorrow. My advice for you, unplug, be present, and do your best to keep your mind open and clutter-free as you set aside your academic responsibilities for a day or 2. This is your time, so enjoy it. So I'd like to now call Dr. Deanna Davis to the podium to introduce our keynote speaker. Deanna Davis has a PhD in music, and she's a professional development and instructional design specialist with the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. She's also a key player behind the organization of this year's symposium. Deanna.
Thank you, Dr. Holbeveen. Good morning. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Dr. Curtis Clarke. Dr. Clarke is the Deputy Minister of Education for the Government of Alberta. And for those who may not know this, the position of Deputy Minister is the senior civil servant in a ministry or department. That's code for it's a key leadership position with many, many responsibilities. Dr. Clarke is an experienced leader who embodies lifelong professional development and showcases what it means to have an evolving career trajectory. His PhD is in sociology from York University in Toronto, Ontario. Dr. Clarke was an associate professor and coordinator for the Criminal Justice Program at Athabasca University. Some of his accomplishments that caught my eye from his biography was his role as the president of the Canadian Association of Police Educators, board member of the National Police Sector Council, and founding member of the Interpol Group of Experts in Training. He has helped to design and implement national and international models of competency-based curriculum, design, and delivery. On LinkedIn, Dr. Clarke describes himself as someone who challenges the status quo and helps others do the same. Dr. Curtis Clarke is a member of our FGSR's Professional Development Advisory Board, and his ministry has hired graduate student interns. I know Dr. Clarke will be sharing some of his own career journey, and there will be time for questions and answers following his talk, and we'd ask that you would use the floor mics to ask those questions. And this is just a hint from me, another pro tip. This is a great opportunity for you to practice asking questions at conferences. Please keep in mind that we are being live streamed as you ask those questions. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Curtis Clarke to the podium for the opening keynote titled, Think Different, Why Using a New Lens to Take Stock of Your Skills Will Make the World a Better Place.
Well, thank you, Deanna, and good morning. It is truly an honor to be with you here today. And so let me begin with a short jaunt back in history. Nearly 100 years ago, the University of Alberta awarded its first graduate degrees, 2 Masters of Arts degrees and 3 Masters of Sciences. And those 5 first recipients were probably asking themselves the same thing you're asking yourselves today. Now what? It is the same question I asked myself when I was sitting where you are, and I will confess, it took some searching to find the answer. In fact, if you were to look at my CV, it would suggest that I can't keep a job, and I took a long time to figure out what the hell I was going to do in my life, let alone an academic track. But herein lies the secret. If the search is too easy, it probably won't be very meaningful. And since we are here talking about your future, I'd venture to say that most of you aspire to find some meaning and purpose in your life. So how do we do that? 2 words, think different. Now, my apologies to you who are English degrees holders. Think different is not just a grammatically incorrect phrase meant to set your teeth on edge. It is also the theme of a groundbreaking 1997 Apple advertising campaign. Now, you know we are in the age of marketing when the meaning of life comes from an advertising campaign. Now, these ads in this campaign honored those who dared to think different. Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King, Alfred Hitchcock, John Lennon, to mention a few. But the campaign itself is a lesson in why it is so important to search for meaningful answers. According to Steve Jobs, the Think Different campaign answered 3 big questions for Apple. Who are we? What do we stand for? and where do we fit in this world? And by digging deep to find those answers, Apple positioned itself as not only a game changer, but a world changer. And as you prepare to step into the next phase of your life, I encourage each of you to ask yourself these very same 3 questions. So let's begin. Who are you? Well, you are postgrads, and this achievement sets you apart from most other Canadians. Your commitment to your education, your investment of time and money, and your determination to achieve your chosen goal, be it a master's degree, a PhD, or postdoctoral, it pegs you as a person who knows that hard work and focus help you start and finish something, even if you're not sure where that exactly might be. So let me place this in context. Gone are the days when you could do a PhD and be guaranteed a tenure-track position with a university. In 2005 and 2006, the US produced more than 100,000 doctoral degrees. In that same period, there were just over 16,000 new professor jobs within the academy. Here in Canada, only about 10 to 15% of postgrads will get tenure jobs. Now, those are sobering statistics. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here or to have you think of this as bad news. Instead, what I want you to think about is that it really is an opportunity to keep asking yourself the questions that I posed earlier. So question number 2, what do you stand for? Now, we've already noted that you are determined. The fact that you are here now means you stand for all the things that have gotten you this far, and that's pretty far. Intelligence, diligence, focus, the sheer stamina to defend a thesis on 0 hours of sleep and too much caffeine, remarkable attributes. But beyond the skills that got you through this academic journey, let's look at some of those other skills. Communication and interpersonal skills, critical and creative thinking, personal effectiveness, integrity and ethical conduct, teaching competence, societal and civic responsibilities, leadership, research management, knowledge mobilization, and knowledge translation, to name a few. What a coincidence. These same skills are also highly valued outside of the academic world. In fact, especially these days, the people who possess these skills, you, are in demand by large industries and governments. Because the people who possess these skills, you, have the potential to change the world for the better. So question number 3, where do you fit in? Consider this. Where better can you change the world but in the public service? Now, okay, here's where you might be thinking. The government is the last place where change is going to happen. It's common knowledge that governments are notoriously slow to let go of old ways of thinking and embrace new ideas. Am I right? Well, here's today's reality. Increasingly, and around the world, public services are transforming the way they do business. The image of buttoned-down bureaucrats slowly churning out policy from stale cubicles, never straying far from the status quo, is giving way to a new kind of policymaker, one who is looking at more innovative and, dare I say, exciting approaches. Governments are prioritizing innovation, and they're using new tactics, such as behavioral science, which takes an evidence-based approach and an understanding of people when creating and implementing public policy. They're using tactics like nudging to evoke positive behaviors in people, like encouraging parents to get their kids vaccinated, or motivating people to use less energy, or pay their taxes on time. A number of governments have built teams of public servants who apply innovation, research, and new ways of thinking to policymaking. The UK has created the Behavioral Insights team, which has spearheaded projects including reducing gender pay gap and improving the way government makes decisions. The Australian government has instituted the Behavioral Institute, and it is applying research and innovation to address issues around the health system, domestic violence, social housing, and obesity. The Obama White House embedded a Behavioral Insights unit within the administration in an effort to influence policy development during his term. In Canada, the clerks of the Privy Council and the Public Service Commissioners have nationally signed off on the Declaration of Innovation, a groundbreaking document that commits public services to principles that support innovation. The Department of National Defense has been using human-centered design and behavioral insights to recruit more women into the armed forces. And the Innovation Lab at Employment and Social Development Canada has used behavioral insights to help people find jobs in ways never imagined possible. And in Alberta, well, Alberta's public service is innovating too. We have Alberta Innovates, which has a mandate to support and accelerate research, innovation, and entrepreneurship in all sectors and all markets, now and into the future. Some of its work includes keeping Alberta competitive in the global marketplace, preparing our province for a low-carbon future, and keeping Albertans healthy through the advancement of medical knowledge, treatment, and best clinical practices. It supports a team of scientific and technical experts who focus on the full research and innovation continuum, with an eye on taking ideas from the lab to the marketplace. Recently, the Executive Council opened the Alberta Digital Innovation Office with a fundamental goal of developing creative disruptors to drive digital innovation within the Government of Alberta. We've also established an Energy CoLab team, a small group of public servants who use systemic design and strategic foresight to create new and innovative solutions to complex challenges within the energy sector. In education, we have established coalition teams and cross-functional teams to tackle some of the ministry's most complex problems from a human-centered, interdisciplinary approach. We created a film lab to leverage the power of video to promote engagement and knowledge mobilization. We've also created Studio 44, not Studio 54 of the storied days of disco, but Studio 44. And it's an innovative collaborative workspace designed specifically to support multiple engagement strategies, including human-centered design, appreciative inquiry, empathy and journey mapping, creative cafes, coaching, and mentorship. And these are just a few of the innovations that are occurring across government, nationally and internationally and provincially. Now, who do you think delivers these strategies, holds the spaces for these complex challenges, conducts user research, leverages video, advances new thinking, and challenges the process of policy development? Now, who is best positioned to promote these new ways of approaching policy and program development so that government becomes relevant and effective and efficient again? Who inspires teams to make a vision of a stronger Alberta a reality? Well, it's you. Creative thinkers, innovators, people with critical thinking skills and strong research abilities and capacity. People who lead with passion and integrity. Individuals who understand societal and civic responsibilities. People who think different. Now, careers in the public service are more exciting, more inspiring, and more rewarding than ever before. The opportunities to make a difference are wide-ranging. Today's policymakers are research experts, innovators, and thought leaders. They are limited only by their ability to imagine great things. And they are making life better for everyone. And these folks are just like you. So in conclusion, a career in public service is an opportunity to put the skills you've already acquired into practice, to change the direction of government from within and transform the way we serve the public and prepare for the future. Working in the public service is your opportunity to tackle challenges head on, and by anticipating trends, researching solutions, understanding people, and engaging with other great minds to do great things. Let me leave you with the closing line from Apple's Think Different ad. The people who are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones who actually do. This is your chance and your turn to create a future, a better future. Think about it and think different. Thank you very much.
We'll open the floor to questions now. We just have the mic coming out as we speak.
So first of all, thank you for the great talk. I was just wondering, so if I were interested in looking further into getting a job in public service, where would be the first place to start looking for that?
So there are a number of opportunities, and one of them is through FGSR. We support a number of internships within government. So for example, in education, and although it is education, it is not just teachers we're looking for. We're looking for a breadth of innovators and cross-disciplinary approaches to a lot of our policy areas. So we fund anywhere from 15 to 25 interns per year. You actually come into the ministry and you're not photocopying, you're thrown right into the trenches and you are working on big, hairy policy issues so that you get exposed to what government is, and we get exposed to the skill sets that you bring to the table, and ensure that you're not going to be sitting bored, you're actually going to be using the skill sets that I referenced here. IPAC, the Institute of Public Administration Canada, also has a number of funded interns that we have with the Government of Alberta. And again, those individuals come in different ministries, and they may not necessarily be what you think your disciplinary focus is, but it does give you those exposures to those policy problem-solving areas within government. And then ministries themselves have opportunities that look at bringing in research interns at a variety of different levels. So there are venues in, and I think FGSR can be one of your first sort of platforms to touch base with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your words. I was intrigued by Studio 44. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit, like what it is and how it works?
Sure. So one of the things that we found in government is that, like the CoLab and a variety of other spaces, we need to get out of the traditional sense of let's have a meeting, sit around a boardroom and just kind of have long conversations, and we all walk away going, well, that was a great conversation, but nothing was done other than probably 3 hours of my time that I'll never get back. So what we've done is we've looked at similar think labs or thought-provoking labs across the world. And this enables us to bring in a variety of different facilitated processes, design thinking, foresight, techniques of how you problem solve. And those spaces are set up so that they are environments that really do facilitate and stimulate that kind of off-the-wall thinking. And And it also is not just the room, it is the people who are engaged with it, the people we train to facilitate and utilize those rooms, both from a technological perspective, but also to engage those who come in and use those spaces. It's an open and free space for those very sort of, let's tear those big hairy problems apart, do problem solving that's a little different than tradition, and then also utilize what comes out of those to be fed up to the executive and supervisors to actually then implement the problem solving processes that come out of those rooms. So it is a different way of looking at problem solving and the environment that stimulates creative thought, and then also is a safe space for those kinds of environments as well. And it's something that's not traditional to government.
Good morning.
Morning.
The list of skills that you talked about, you started with communication, creative thinking, all those things. Sometimes I struggle with my own education to be able to give examples as to how I'm using that. And maybe with your experience, you're like, yeah, of course, you have those skills. Can you elaborate more, give some examples of how we've developed those through our education so that when we're in an interview or speaking to a potential employer, we aren't just listing off the skills that we have, but actually giving examples of how those are developed?
Certainly. So if you look at just even the research capacity, the fact that you've had to do that kind of work to address a research question that you've articulated, that breadth of determination, the ability to look at cross-disciplinary approaches, to look and explore at areas that answer a particular question that you have. If you can explain that to an employer, as opposed to just saying, well, my dissertation was in this, and leave it at that, and assume that they know what you're talking about, that's what we're trying to do with a lot of our students as they come in, and even in our interns. We want them to explain the skill sets they have and how it is utilized in the work they're doing. For example, if you're having to promote a piece of policy in the work that you've done, you need to be able to communicate that to the minister, to a deputy minister, to external stakeholders, for example. You need to be able to sort of transfer the knowledge of, in this specialized area, this is its application. You've been doing that day in and day out in all of the work that you do in your classroom, in your teaching opportunities, in your research, in your engagement with your professors, and with your colleagues as well. You need to then assume that those of us who are outside academia are idiots, that we do not understand how that gets teased out. So part of your job is to take the time to pull those concepts out, those skills, and apply them in a world that makes more sense to people in government, in the private sector. But once you can do that, that aha moment is palpable. They understand that. And that's one of the reasons why we do that with our interns in education. So at the end of their time, they actually have to do a presentation to myself, assistant deputy ministers, other managers, articulating not only the project they've worked on, but the skill sets that they have drawn out of that in terms of their experience in the environment. So it enables them to look at not only what they did, but enhance and articulate the skills that I've just articulated as well.
So without coming across condescending, right?
Oh, yeah, don't be condescending. Yeah, oh yeah, you're an idiot, I know. Dr. Clarke said you're all idiots. No, it is about just taking that leap of faith that you need to explain. And remember, you're presenting yourself. Here's a basket of things that I can do and that I have achieved through my academic trajectory. And I just want you to know about that. Or even if you're looking at a problem-solving question that they give you, help to frame that in the skills that you're bringing to the table as well. And that's not just your academic prowess. It is all of the other things that you'll bring to the table.
A large percentage of the students that graduate from University of Alberta have an international background. I am wondering, is it any different for people who do not have Canadian residency or citizenship to get into public policy?
You know, we are in a global world. And as much as one might think that, even for using the example of education, that it's a very parochial aspect of, we only deal with Alberta. Our lens is much broader than that. We deal with the OECD because they track the educational well-being of provinces from an economic perspective. I sit on the Council of Ministers of Education, which is all deputy ministers and ministers across the country. But then we also link to international bodies. We have students coming in from, obviously, from around the globe, but we're also working with jurisdictions around the globe as well in terms of being able to share best practices, our research. So we're always looking for people who have that context, who are able to place the work that we're doing in other jurisdictions. Understand the value of the work that we do in government is not just a gain for the citizens of our jurisdiction, it is a global approach. And if we don't start thinking in those terms, the big hairy problems that we need to work on become very small and very limited, and we are no longer competitive in the world that we need to exist in. So those international experiences and those opportunities for international students to be part of our intern programs, that's something that we're embracing for sure. And I think it's an important piece that we have to, within the public service, think more thoughtful about.
Good morning. I'd like to say thank you for the acknowledgement of being on Treaty 6 territory. And I have a bit of a context that I want to bring in, a question to ask about the future of education with respect to Indigenous peoples. Mm-hmm. Over the last 2 days, I've attended the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs meeting on the south side here. And one of the issues on the table was the Memorandum of Understanding regarding First Nations education in Alberta. And in the room, a question that I have is how many of the students at this level are Indigenous from our area or from this country? And to further that question, in terms of the innovation, is there any type of reconciliatory research in terms of educational outcomes for Indigenous peoples? I'm wondering if you could answer that.
Brilliant question, and thank you very much. Yes, the MOU is an interesting beast unto itself, but let me just expand on a number of the things that the government of Alberta is undertaking, but more specifically education, because that was the focus of your question. So in our ministry, I have a division that's called the First Nations, Métis and Inuit Directorate of Education. There is an Assistant Deputy Minister, Nicole Calahoo, who is a graduate of Native Studies and is overseeing the remarkable research and capacity building for the nations in and around education. So a number of the pieces that we are working on right now is there are 2 protocol tables with the Blackfoot Confederacy. In fact, actually, I was at that table yesterday, and a number of the panel members who were at the conference that you were at that meeting after that session as well. And then Treaty 8, the protocol table as well. In those protocol tables, there's an education one in both of those treaty relationships. Last week, we just had the first international conference on land-based education. It was sponsored by our ministry and by the federal government, as well as Norquest and Kitaskanau Tribal Council and Sotina Education Authority. This was a conference looking at national, provincial, and international opportunities to think about what land-based education is, how important it is to the nations, how important it is to culture, and how do we support that within the nations and their education authorities, but how do we embed that into the mainstream education systems, provincially, nationally, and internationally as well? We're now working on our curriculum. It is we're the only province to have attempted a full review of K-12 curriculum. The K-4 will be released the first part of December. And in that, we are embedding First Nations, Métis, and Inuit ways of thinking, knowledge, and subject content, and working with the nations to develop that. We're also working with our curriculum working groups that have representative from the First Nations education authorities and teachers, so that we're ensuring that the curriculum embraces those concepts and ensures that it is woven through all subject matters from K to 12, so that it's not just a chunk, it is a part of every subject from K to 12 as well. We've now implemented standards for teachers that is legislated, that all teachers, principals, and superintendents, in terms of their leadership standards, must have a First Nations, Métis, and Inuit component to Indigenous ways of thinking, knowledge, and embracing that. And in fact, they do not get certified unless they have not had the developmental training. And that is legislated. We just rolled that out in the spring. So my ministry oversees that. So there are a number of things that we're doing in terms of that. We're working now next week with Dr. Steinhauer from, I think she is with Extension. And then we're also working with Native Studies to implement ongoing training within our ministry in and around treaties. And again, bringing our staff up to a base understanding of the impact of education on learning outcomes for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students. And it is also a major part of our business plan that we will close the gap between mainstream students, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students. And that is an ongoing piece of activity. But we don't do that unless we have researchers. It's not a willy-nilly kind of thing, like let's plug that and put it in a statement somewhere. Our ministry and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Education Directorate and our curriculum branch are utilizing First Nations, Métis, and Inuit scholars. We're ensuring that they are part of our teams and asking the questions, what's important? For example, tomorrow I'm off to Frog Lake to have a conversation with the Education Authority up there about what we can do as a ministry that doesn't undermine or take away the responsibility of the federal government, but the role of the province in augmenting and supporting nations as they build and develop their education authorities. We're spending a lot of time working with Kitaskanau Tribal Council. KTC is one of the first standalone education authorities in the province. Maskwacis was the second, and we're now looking at developing more and more of those areas with other nations who want standalone authorities. But it takes research, it takes engagement, it takes thoughtful and interesting ways of doing business that we've never done before. So I could go on because I'm extremely proud of where we're going. Have we hit the magic mark? No, but there's so much more to do, and it is with people like you that we can move these kinds of yardsticks ahead.
Thank you,
you're not
Dr.
a
Clarke.
student. I don't get
Yeah, I
asked.
know. I waited. There were no more questions from the students. I'm Nana Lee from U of T. I'm delivering the next workshop. Actually, I just wanted to comment on the student over there that talked about getting into government. Along with Dr. Clarke's resources, MyTax has a National Science Fellowship program. So if you want to go into a postdoctoral fellowship as a science policy and work in Ottawa, that's an option there. They pick about a dozen a year. And for those of you that are from the US, AAAS, they also have a science policy fellowship in DC. And I think some of them might be open to non-US citizens. You'd have to look into that. Now, the other way of doing this is a colleague of mine, he did a PhD in biochemistry, but every summer he volunteered with his counselor. And by the time that he finished his 5 years of PhD in biochemistry, they all knew him there. And they said, Corey, you know a bit about science. Do you want to be our science policy advisor? So he didn't have an internship. His internship was over the 5 years that he volunteered at their HQ. So there are some other ways of getting into that. And the other question about the communicating your skills to future employers. If you haven't heard of this already, there's a technique called STAR. In an interview setting or in a networking setting, you set up the situation, the task, the action you took, and the results. So you're telling a story. It's not enough to have your thesis title, but what's the story? How many scientists did you collaborate with? What projects do you spearhead? How many undergrads did you mentor? The impact stories, that's what employers are looking for. Question to you, Dr. Clarke. I think all the students in this room are probably wondering how you made these career transitions, and did you have any mentors along the way?
Good question. And two stories. So when I was finishing off my MA at Queen's and I transitioned to York, my MA supervisor had just come from the federal government and had spent a fair amount of time in the policy with the Solicitor General and developing policy in and around policing. So I spent some time with her, and then she moved to York and I moved to York to do my PhD with her. It was her experiences and her exposure, or her giving me exposure to policy folks at the federal and the provincial level, and also within municipal policing as well, that really helped me start thinking about the value of policy, but also how the work that I was doing in my dissertation could align to the world of government. So she was a strong mentor, both from her experiences, but also asking me the right questions that I could see the transfer between my academic work to a policy orientation. So that was something that always inspired me, so that even when I went into my first academic position, I was always thinking, where's that policy position that might unfold? Fast-tracked, I came up to my first sabbatical. I then reached out to the then Minister of the Solicitor General at the time and said, listen, I'm going on sabbatical. It's not going to cost you anything. The university is paying me. I would like to be embedded in one of your policy shops. And if there is something you would like me to work on, I am yours for the year. Just give me an office and access, and I would be more than happy to do that. Well, first of all, there was shock in his face. What is this? You're coming and offering something free, and you are a tenured academic? Okay, well, whatever. So, sure enough, I spent a year building police policies for the province and in and around training. The province didn't have a consistent model of training for law enforcement, and I helped to build that. At the end of the year, the minister came back to me and said, you know what? Why don't we second you for one more year? Just one more year. We agreed to that at the university, and then my role expanded. About 3/4 of the way through that final year, they finally said to me, you know what? You're not going back. Why don't you just stay here? And, you know, we'll make you a full-time employee, and there's great opportunities for someone like you. So it was that experience, that exposure to other individuals, that one, I had to tell the story about the value of what I could bring to the table, but also pushing on the edges of things that they were not used to, i.e. academics coming to them and saying, I can help, as opposed to, I can come to you and throw stones at the work that you're doing. The other conversation that I had just recently, and it was at the Hertig lecture here at U of A. I had dinner with the Canadian Embassy, the Canadian ambassador to the US. He had taken a few days off between the NAFTA negotiations and was the keynote speaker here. And he and I were chatting about his long history and the things that he had done. And his is a trajectory that was not, I will do this, and then I will do this for the rest of my life. His CV looks something like mine, all over the place. And I said, well, what is that? How come you've become so successful? But nothing is a clear trajectory from, I graduated in this discipline and I moved to here. He said, I've always left doors open. When a door opens up and an opportunity seems to be just right, I'll walk through it. But I haven't closed any doors. I'm always looking for something. People will always come to you if you're open to new ideas and opportunities. And the interesting piece is that he had a fair amount to do with Prime Minister Trudeau's election. And he had no sense that he was actually going to do anything with the government afterwards. He already had a large corporate position. He's a successful business individual. And eventually, after the election, the Prime Minister's office came to him and said, what do you want? He said, I don't want anything, really. I don't want anything. I've got a good job. Everything's good. I'm living in Toronto. Things are good. We're successful. No, really, what do you want? We said, well, okay, just, out of the blue. I'd like to be the ambassador to the US. Done. So, again, leaving doors open, looking for options, and also watch what you wish for.
Hi, I'd like to ask you about how PhD graduates can overcome the whole notion that we are overeducated but underexperienced. I'm from the Resource Economics and the Environmental Sociology department, and most of our graduates end up in the public policy, various ministries. But most of those jobs looking for a master graduate who has a tiny bit of research experience, but mainly good with interpersonal skills. And the PhD graduates feel that we are just too much for that. They're not looking for our skills. And I looked into all kinds of things and one of that national program, but I didn't find anything like that in Alberta. Is there any place in the public policy who are really looking for that deep kind of researcher that requires a PhD?
Actually, I think there are a number of those positions. And in fact, and I can speak to education, I probably have the largest number of PhDs in any ministry. And again, it goes back to that idea of, yes, we are looking for possibly a specialized area, but we're also expecting those PhD students or those graduates to evolve, to adapt. And in part, I think that that's something that we as PhD graduates have to think about, that the world that we've just spent the last 5 years in is not the thing that clearly articulates who we are. We need to keep thinking that we are always going to learn and we're always going to evolve. And that goes back to part of telling the story about what you do, what you're bringing to the table. And yes, I may be hired because of this particular research capacity and ability that I have, but don't let that pigeonhole you in your public service career. You need to be thinking about the depth of what your education is and those experiences, and challenge your own thinking about that narrowness that you work in. But there are lots of positions now that we're looking at in government where, in the old days it would have been, oh, PhD, way too qualified. You're going to be bored doing this. We're now looking at going, PhD, wow, how can we utilize that skill set, but then also look at, from a long-term perspective, how can you grow in the public service? How can I leverage your skill set to be much more than just a narrow-focused sort of job function? And that's the other thing you need to think about in terms of the public service. We expect people to move. If you think you're going to be pigeonholed into something and that's going to spend the next 30 years as a public service, that would be tiring, boring, and drudgery. But it also isn't serving the public service by narrowing your skill. So there are opportunities when PhDs can come in because we're hiring them for a specific task, but we want you to move. We want you to grow. And we want you to take that skill set you're coming in with and influencing and supporting your colleagues and in Alberta, all Albertans. So it's part of, yes, we're looking for PhDs and we're looking for specific elements, but we're also looking at you to grow and evolve and keep moving. And it also doesn't mean that you can't leave the public service and come back into the public service. We expect you to do that. In fact, we hope you to do that. Hope you will do that.
Curtis, one of the questions that we'll be asking our alumni panels this afternoon is if you could give a piece of advice for our students as they continue in their program and are about to transition to the workplace, what would that be?
I think two things. Be confident with what you're bringing to the table. We truly are looking for your skill sets. And don't underestimate the value that you bring to a breadth of service, a breadth of expectations in the public service, and even in the private sector, for sure. And the other piece, and one of the things that's truly been beneficial for me and some of my colleagues who I've worked closely with over the number of years, similar to what the ambassador to the US, his philosophy was, keep those doors open. Always look around. Don't assume that someone is going to come and tap you on the shoulder. Part of the process is you looking and being curious about what's out there. Again, that approach that my father, and I'm sure many of your parents or grandparents, took the old approach of, I start a job and I'm going to retire in that job. That world is pretty much unheard of anymore. But how you make that vibrant is the fact that you keep those doors open and you're always looking for something that will enhance not only your skill sets, but something you can bring to others and how you will augment and support the work that they're doing. That's something that I'm always looking, always keeping an eye open for something interesting and different. I know that I probably will not remain in this portfolio for much longer, and I'm always looking for what's the next portfolio that I could be moved to. When I started in justice, I thought that would be the end of my career. I would always be in justice. Surprise. In fact, that's the fun part, is the change, looking for change, and always keeping those doors open. Nope.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. My name is Delioe, and I'm from South Africa, so I'm going to use my story as a sort of a case scenario. I'm a pediatrician trained in South Africa, and I specialize in pediatric cardiology, and then did a PhD here, just finished. And now I'm in this state of confusion because I'm a clinician, and I've done a PhD, and I'm considering staying on here in Canada, but to practice requires me to do exams again to be accredited to practice. And jumping in, looking for jobs, in a different career or discipline is frightening for me, with my medical background. So how would you advise me to go about what is there for me out there, job opportunities, if I cannot practice as a clinician because I'm an international graduate?
So I think two things. And it is unfortunate that structurally, it puts barriers in place for individuals such as you, who are talented, knowledgeable, and obviously skilled and accredited in other jurisdictions. From a government perspective, we're having to look at that. So from that perspective, there is a legislative move afoot to start looking at how do we truly look at accreditation in a more appropriate way. I'm not promising anything, but that is a discussion that's happening at a number of political levels. So there is that. But the other part of it too, and that doesn't help you right now because you still have those hoops to jump through and the expectations of ongoing accreditation. But the one thing that I would suggest is that don't lose your passion. It is one of those pieces where that is a door that will always remain open. And what are the things that you can do to continue to support your trajectory to get you back to where that area is? Are there experiences that enable you to use those skill sets as a clinician, as a passionate individual who cares about patients and the well-being of individuals? How do you use those roads in to support the outcome that you're looking for in the long run? And I don't know enough about your discipline or the field area itself, but this is where I would also suggest that, again, that passion and that desire, how can you find the linkages? And that's where that networking process becomes very important for you to make sure that those networks and those who might be mentors or who may understand another venue for you to follow to get you to that end goal, that you keep looking for those. And you support the network of the university and those who are also already in the clinical world, so that you expand where you're looking to and where your networks and your capacity might evolve differently.
For one more question, and then we'll break.
Thank you very much. My question is a little bit different. Like normally we're talking about how to go into the workforce from a student career, like student life. But my question is other way. I'm working full time. I'm doing PhD part time. But now I feel like I need to put more time on my study and research. But how does government or like FGSR work in that scenario that someone like a full-time employee and full-time dad can come to a full-time student because I have to leave my job and I have to put more effort in the study? And does like government support that or FGSR support that, or from your like any of your experience, like what's your suggestion for us? Like I want to be a full-time student, but I can't really quit my job because I need to run my family, right? Thank you.
Well, that's appropriate because that's my story. When I went back to school, I was a police officer, and I had a choice, either to attempt to do graduate work part-time or leave the profession. And so I left the profession, but I also continued to work because I had to work, and not through grants or funding through my academic experience, but it was a variety of other things. And that is a difficult struggle for sure. I think in terms of government, one of the things that we look at when we're looking at some of the intern programs is where that balance is. How do we facilitate the ability of individuals to make money, to have the capacity to continue to live a life, and in your case as an adult learner, where those balances are. And we've had to think long and hard around what those grant models look like, certainly from an intern perspective, and how we might be able to do that. I can't speak for FGSR what the university broadly has to support that. The other part that I found when I was doing that work is it focused the mind. I was in class with students that were probably 15 years younger than I was. Again, I was a father. I had been in the working world for a long time. And my goal was, the PhD was a job. I had to get it done. I wasn't there to spend an extra year formulating probably greater academic questions and diving into it. It was about focusing on what was I trying to achieve by obtaining the PhD, and how would I get back into the workforce. So it was a bit of a balance, and it was a struggle because, again, your colleagues, your academic colleagues, many of them don't have the same kind of responsibilities or the need to balance life, family, and your academic endeavors as well. So now we're starting to recognize, both in government and certainly how we support a variety of things, is that there are more and more individuals who have taken that decision to work, to continue the other responsibilities on top of the academic, and how do we create balance? No simple questions, though. But it is one heck of a challenge for sure, and I can empathize with you there.
And in terms of the FGSR support, it's a very big question that we would need to talk about in a one-on-one, because there's many variables. So what is the departmental support? What is the supervisory support? Is there the opportunity to apply for tri-council funding, scholarships, awards, all those kinds of things? So I'd encourage you to pop by and chat with us at FGSR. I want to say a sincere thank you. It's been a wonderful start to our conference. Many of the things that you have touched on are things that we're going to be talking about at length over the next couple of days, including in our next session, where we'll start to figure out what those skills are and where you've demonstrated them. So it's going to be great. Thank you also to our live stream audience. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us here, and we encourage you to tune in again tomorrow for the closing keynote. And then I would invite all of the participants to join us for a cup of coffee just outside the doors. I believe there's also some cookies out there, and we will resume promptly in 15 minutes. Thank you. Please join me in saying a warm thank you to Dr. Curtis Clarke.
Thank you.
I'm so delighted. Thanks.